Hello and welcome. It's the end of February, which means it's time for another book review, and we're going to start immediately with the book I so desperately wanted to DNF, but I didn't because it's an arc and I felt bad not reading all of it and reviewing it. So we are starting with Serpent, the Scriver. To briefly summarize the book for you, it's basically The Witcher, but not very well executed. It's the same type of dark setting with some Slavic folklore and monsters and this brooding anti-hero that just hunts monsters basically, but he also records them and studies them. Now what frustrates me with this is that I feel like the book actually had potential despite all the, common elements with The Witcher. I felt like it did have potential to be its own thing, but the delivery of the book itself and the story was just off. I was ready to DNF it at 20%. Okay? 20%, which is generally rare for me, and it was purely because of the way it was written. Because in the first 50 or 100 pages, it just felt like the author was trying to do the most massive lore dump possible just so she could get the world building out of the way. I have no problem with massive world building, okay? I love my high fantasy. I love very detailed world building and very detailed and structured magical system. I love that, okay? Give me a good high fantasy, I'm down for it. But with this book, it wasn't like the world building was interwoven with the story. It was just info dump. And that for me made reading the book very tedious. And I couldn't get into the story itself. I couldn't get into the conflict, into the characters. And speaking of the characters, they were just so bland. And this anti-hero, the main character, he was supposed to be kind of mysterious, kind of anti-hero, maybe a little bit snarky, with a type of attitude where it's like, I know I'm the best and I don't give up about other people and what they say to me and how they act. I'm just gonna do my own thing. Like, you can't say anything to me. But he was just outright boring. And because it was just so dense and packed with so much information, and information that I felt like didn't really come at the right moments, I just found my eyes glazing over sometimes because I just couldn't focus anymore on the text because it was just getting so tedious. And each chapter began with an excerpt from the Scriver archives that gave you even more information about some creatures and the world itself. But after reading the book, the information that we were given was pretty much unnecessary for the story itself. There is also some romance, but that romance just felt so forced to me and I couldn't care about it at all. I really couldn't care about it. Oh, and I think that the author was very bold to name the main character's teacher / mentor and hunter Alaric. Because I read Alaric and I think, Alaric is a teacher, but he's also a monster hunter. Who does that remind me of? And in my head, the whole time, I just keep seeing
Alaric Saltzman
from the Vampire Diaries. Very bold. A very bold move. But anyway, the story had potential. The execution was just... It was not my cup of tea, let's say it that way. And Serpent gets a 1 out of 5. Oh, and I should mention that Serpent is coming out on May 27th. Whoa! I can't even see my fucking hell. No, you're going away. No. I dream of the day when I will no longer have to depend on the sun for proper lighting. Anyway, we're moving on to... Oh, okay, this actually fits in quite well. Keeper of the Light. I swear that was not intentional. Okay, so Keeper of the Light is your very typical story of the hero's journey, where we have our main character discovering her family's history, who she is, her powers, and just going on that journey together with a few other people. Yeah? It's set in, I would say, an interesting world, and the magic system I thought had very good potential, or at least the elements in the beginning, specifically with the main city and the gargoyles and angels, I thought that was a very interesting concept, and I really, really wish the author would have done more with that, because at some point it was kind of forgotten, or it was, I don't know, it just wasn't used to the extent I would have liked it to be used, because I really felt like it had potential. Now, the book has short chapters and writing style that is quite straightforward, so it is a bingeable book. You can read it very quickly. I also really enjoyed the way that we were introduced to the world. There was a bit of a lore dump, but I think it was executed quite well. Like, it made sense with the way the story was being told, and it made sense for the story itself for it to be done in this way, which I quite liked. Unfortunately, even though I think the book started well in the beginning, it gradually started to lose me, and I really had to force myself to keep reading. Again, this was an arc, so I couldn't just DNF it. And I do have to say that I did get curious as to where we were headed and what exactly was the connection between certain items and powers. So that also kind of pushed me to just finish it. And I would say that the main reason why I started losing interest was the way that the characters were being presented and they were just built. Because at some point, especially through the dialogues, it became very obvious to me that they lacked individuality. Like, at some points you could just get a piece of dialogue that was one character's and then substitute it with another character's, and it just wouldn't really make a difference. I don't mean to the story itself, I mean the tone that was used for the way the characters were speaking was just pretty much identical to everyone. And added to that problem with the characters is also that they felt rather inconsistent in some of the things that they were doing and saying, especially looking at the way that they were being presented to us with their background and their motivations and thoughts, and then just what they did. Now, with that said, I do think that if you're someone who enjoys a very fast-paced read that doesn't really have a very complicated world-building and magic system, you could enjoy this. I think you could, but it really just wasn't the book for me, and I give it 2 out of 5. And before I forget, Keeper of the Light comes out on March 4th. Next up, we have Voice of the Ocean. At this point, can you tell that I have discovered the miracle that is NetGalley? This is another arc, okay? NetGalley, thank you so much for existing. Why didn't I know about this before? Why? Hello? NetGalley is amazing, okay? If you are a reviewer or if you want to start reviewing books, make a NetGalley account, okay? A NetGalley account and a blog or Goodreads or whatever, and just, you know, free books. Yeah. Anyway, Voice of the Ocean. To put it simply, this is a retelling of The Little Mermaid, and it's mixed with pirates.
Come to negotiate, eh? Have you, you slimy git? Look what I got. I got a jar of dirt, I got a jar of dirt, and guess what's inside it?
It has a light and engaging writing style. The plot itself is kind of fun, thanks to the pirates element. I enjoyed being in the head of the main character, Celeste. I enjoyed the way the world was built and the details, because they really created this very vivid picture of the world, and it also had like this very whimsical, magical aspect to it, which I found very cute. The main girl herself, she was, I would say, a very compelling character, and there was also like these tiny little humor like elements to the book that I think just added like an extra level of it being endearing, which was very wholesome to read, honestly. However, at the cost of the very vivid world building, we had the very slow story progression. Very slow development. Like halfway through the book, I found myself scan reading, like I I didn't even notice I was doing it, but at some points there was just so much description of unnecessary details that I just couldn't be bothered to read the paragraph anymore, right? Because we've already done such an extensive world building and I'm already into the story itself and I want to know what's going to happen, what the characters are going to do, all of those stuff. But then there's like this block of unnecessary details that add to the world building, but then it also kind of just takes you out of the story, I would say. Yeah, and at one point I did also feel that we were just going in circles with the emotional drama. Okay, it was just on and on, the same thing. And I really wanted to skip some bits. And while we had all of that very detailed world building and slow development, we ended up with a very rushed ending. It was the type of ending that you just kind of go like, okay, we get some closure and then we have like this door for a further development of the story. But then we get these elements that were just so random that they were either randomly put there out of nowhere just to drive the plot, or they were so predictable you kind of knew from the beginning-ish, or like halfway, that we were going to get that at the end. So there really wasn't like a surprise aspect to it. It was both rushed, predictable, and kind of questionable. It is also a romance story, right? But the romance to me was a little bit hit or miss. I did enjoy kind of the dialogue, the banter. I wouldn't quite call it banter, but I did enjoy that. I enjoyed the humor, but also there was so much going in circles and sometimes it just felt forced. And of course we had this like kind of insta love trope, which I'm not really a big fan of, but it is a Little Mermaid retelling, so that was kind of obvious it was gonna happen. Overall, I do give it a 3 out of 5 and I am undecided on whether I'm going to read the second book. Now, Voice of the Ocean is coming out, I think, sometime in April. The 22nd of April. So if you want kind of a light-hearted, quick, easy read, then you might enjoy Voice of the Ocean. Next, we have Tomb of the Sun King. This is the second book from the writers of the Arcane series. I quite enjoyed the first one. I gave it a 4 out of 5. This is basically for the lovers of books, not of books, but of movies like The Mummy and Indiana Jones and all of these like adventure novels as well. It is a book that you read and you basically know what's going to happen, but you just want to read it because that's exactly what you're looking for. The second book takes us to Egypt, where we are trying to find a staff that is the staff of Moses, that is supposed to be able to do some very destructive stuff. Yeah, so of course we have Adam and Ellie, our two main characters, and we are also introduced to Ellie's brother, who is Adam's best friend, and Ellie's best friend, which we met in book 1, but she just kind of just was there for a little bit and then she went away because Ellie went away. Anyway, so we are introduced to a lot more side characters, and we are also introduced to a potential other couple. And so the focus kind of shifts from Adam and Ellie to that other potential couple, which is definitely not a bad thing to do, because what tends to happen with romance stories is that when the main couple kind of gets together, I would say a lot of readers lose interest, because reading romance novels is about kind of the thrill, you know, the thrill of a new relationship, of will they one day, who's going to make the next move, you know, that type of thrill, right? And the budding romance. And then when the characters get together, I'd say a lot of people just lose interest, right? With Adam and Ellie, they're not exactly together, but they are definitely getting there. And so we are introduced to another potential couple to follow to keep things interesting, which is a good idea, I would say. But the problem here comes in that the focus almost fully shifts to that other couple. And I'm not here for that. I'm here to read about Adam and Ellie. Yeah, that's what got me into the series. That's what I want to read about. And I would say that probably more than half of the book is about other characters. There's also a lot more, I would say, plot and like historical stuff in this book than there were in the first one. And you can definitely tell that there has been a lot of research put into this book, which I really appreciate and I really enjoy. However, there was a little bit too much, and so the story dragged a lot. Because at least with the first one, it was a lot more fast-paced, or at least it felt like it was more fast-paced. And, you know, this is supposed to be like this adventure novel, and there's like limited time, and they're kind of competing with another group to get to the treasure. Here it's not a treasure, but anyway, they're competing, and there has to be this tension. But because we also spent so much time with the history, gets a bit too slow, and you kind of lose that aspect of the adventure novel. I do also have a few issues with the writing itself. There are mainly three. Okay, the first one is that we get too much repetition of stuff. Like stuff that has happened in the previous chapter, and then we're kind of reminded of it in the next chapter, and in the next chapter, and then after 2 more chapters. And it's like, okay, yes, I know that this happened. We don't have to rehash it so many times. And it's not just about events, but it's also about the emotions that characters feel. Like, yes, I know that you feel this way, okay? Let's move on. Let's just keep going. That's one of the issues. The second issue is that some of the ways that emotions are being described and interactions are a little bit too detailed in a way that it doesn't really make sense, like it's just overdone. So for an example, there was this sentence, page 162, and it says, his voice rich with heat, respect, and affection. And I'm trying to imagine in my head what that voice would sound like. Like, how is the voice going to convey all these 3 emotions at once? It's just a little bit too much. Let's just settle on 2 things, yeah? Because 3 gets a little bit, yeah. And the third issue I have is with the way all the feminism is put to you, yeah? Because Ellie is a feminist, so is Constance, so is like pretty much all the women that we are introduced to, and it's a big point for their characters. Great. Love that, right? But it's on the verge of it being too much, of it being a little bit too preachy, and also sometimes a little bit too convenient for the plot. I love an empowered woman, a main character that, you know, takes charge, or where you get side characters that are women and they take charge and whatever. But when it's basically every single female character in the book doing those things, for me it gets a little bit too much, a little bit too unrealistic, and the way that they talk about the issues women face, a bit too much. Okay, just maybe dial it down a little bit. Or don't dial it down, but find a way to present it where it doesn't sound preachy. Tomb of the Sun King gets a 3 out of 5, and I am looking forward to reading the next book. I do also have a minor complaint that I think should be addressed to Amazon and its printing, because I'm pretty sure this was printed from Amazon. Can you spot the height difference? I'm probably nitpicking, but come on. Like, why? Explain. Just print them the same. We are moving on to Cursed in Love, which was also an arc, but it's now out. So this is a paranormal romance that takes place in a small town. So it has that, you know, small town charm. Think Gilmore Girls, where everyone knows everyone and is butting into everyone's business. Surprisingly, I was smiling from the beginning. It's very light-hearted, it's fun, I love the banter, I like the main character. She, to me, was in a way relatable, but also just funny. And I enjoyed being in her head, even though it was a mess. Now, I will say that it's not exactly a cozy book, in the sense that it does have some darker elements, like codes and blood magic. So if you're not into that type of stuff, then don't pick up this book. And if you do pick up this book, then don't really expect fluffy cute magic, okay? That's not it. The book was a little bit cringe at times, and I do think that the love interest was kind of inconsistent. We are also talking about the insta love trope, which, as I said, I'm not a fan of, but I did manage to swallow it and just keep on reading. But I also just don't understand why everything had to happen within a week, okay? The whole book, everything that happens in a week. Why couldn't we just kind of had it spread out? Because if we did, then it would have felt a lot more believable. Because it did at the end feel rushed and also way too convenient. That aside, I do think the highlight of the book was the side characters, because they were all lovable and endearing in their own way, and I just thoroughly enjoyed a specific group of side characters. Oh, and there was one thing that really annoyed me, and that was the constant repetition of the phrase, "sweet purple ponies." The first few times, fine, it's funny, but the more you repeat it, the more annoying it gets. As a general rule, don't let one joke run for way too long. Anyway, Cursed in Love gets a 4 out of 5. We're moving on to The Lost Apprentice, which is, again, another arc. Okay, but, as some of you may know, I am a law student. This book is about lawyers and magic. Magical lawyers. Like, I read that and I was like, sign me up. I will say though, if you are not into that type of stuff, you might not like the book. But if you are a law student, or if you just love law dramas and whatever, pick that book up, okay? It's also a mystery book because we're dealing with the disappearance of the main character's cousin, and she goes to work in a law firm, the same law firm that her cousin worked for, trying to find out what happened to her cousin. That's the main motivation of the character, that's the main driving point for the plot, right? And then we discover there's magic. Yes. I'm not going to tell you what the magic is, but if you just think carefully about what lawyers do the most, you might guess it. Anyway, I also enjoyed the writing style itself because I thought that the author had an interesting way of structuring sentences. It wasn't too flowery, it definitely wasn't pretentious, it also wasn't dry. I feel like she found a very good balance between flowery and imaginative sentences and writing straight to the point. Very good, I would say. It's also just a very fast-paced book. Things happen quite quickly. There is also a love element to the story, and I have to say, I was not expecting there to be smut, but there is one smut scene. Just a warning. Okay? The story itself takes place in Dublin, and I think what really adds some extra charm to the book is the little tidbits and just the little sprinkles of Irish history and Celtic history, and it created this very vivid image of Dublin, and it also helped kind of root the characters. Is that what I want to say? Give roots to the characters? To be fair, the mysterious element quite quickly started becoming less mysterious. But, you know what? I don't really care about that so much. The ending did feel a little bit too Scooby-Doo-esque, a little bit too convenient. So that was definitely a minus in my books. But other than that, I would say it's a good dark academia book. and I would love to own my own copy. The book is already out, so I am going to buy a copy probably next month. The Lost Apprentice gets 4 out of 5. We're moving on to If We Were Villains. Okay, this book I picked up for 2 reasons. The first one is that I read Graveyard Shift, did not really enjoy it, but I liked the writing style of the author, so I thought that I would like to read something else that she has written. The second reason is that since I read The Secret History, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. Okay, which is weird because I didn't think I liked it that much. I gave it a 4 out of 5, but now I have reevaluated and I'm definitely giving it a 5 out of 5 because it has been 2 months and I still think about it every day and I don't understand why. Okay, I don't know why it has such a grasp on me, but it is what it is. So I have been trying to read something similar, and If We Were Villains is recommended for fans of The Secret History. I can definitely see why. It has a lot of similar aspects, and it's definitely and unfortunately not as good. But it's still a well-written book. I still enjoyed it. It's a dark academia book about 6 students studying to be actors, and they specifically focus on Shakespeare. So all they do is Shakespeare's plays. Nothing else. And of course, we have a murder. And the book begins with the main character, Oliver, actually getting out of prison 10 years after the murder. And you have the detective who was working on the case before visiting him and asking him to tell him the full story and what actually happened. And Oliver agrees because the detective has now not retired, but he has quit the force and is now working in private security details. The book is separated into acts, and each act begins with Oliver in the present talking to the detective, and then it moves on to different scenes from the past, which Oliver is telling us about, basically. So we get this timeline before the murder, and then after it. So I'd say the main mystery element at first is, did Oliver do it? And then if he hadn't done it, who has done it and how? And that's pretty much the story. Yeah? The characters, I would say, are very distinct from each other. I did enjoy that. They had their own personality and you could definitely see it in their actions and just the way they spoke. And as I was reading this, specifically in the beginning, I definitely felt the suspense building up to the murder itself, and it kept me reading. And I just kept thinking, okay, now it's going to happen. Okay, now it's going to happen, and you just keep expecting it to happen, you know, and I found that very, very engaging. I do have to say, though, that I found the emotional twist at the end unconvincing, and I was kind of disappointed that we even headed in that direction. And judging by this book, and also by Graveyard Shift, I think the author's main issue, the main problem that she has to overcome, at least in my humble opinion, okay, I know I'm not an expert, but the problem is that her weakness is in writing compelling endings. Because that was the problem I had with Graveyard Shift as well. It was going so well, and then the ending came and I was just disappointed. And the same happened with If We Were Villains. But other than that, I do think that she can build very good characters. And she does have good ideas for, you know, just stories. And I would love to read more of her works if she still writes in the same type of dark academia genre, because I just want to read more dark academia, apparently. I just want to read more books like The Secret History, okay? At this point, I'm desperate. If you have any recommendations of books that are similar to The Secret History, please share. And I mean both setting-wise and writing style-wise, okay? I want university, school, college setting, whatever, and I want good prose. Please, thank you. Okay, anyway, sorry, back to If We Were Villains. It gets a 4 out of 5. Okay, we are moving on to the final arc of the month and the final book of the month. Okay, and that is, I'm very excited to talk about it, is the Irresistible Urge to Fall for Your Enemy. Okay, now listen to me very carefully. I love this book to bits. I am dying to have my own copy, okay? You don't understand. You just don't understand, okay? It's coming out in July. I will be patient, okay? I will show patience. I read it, thanks to NetGalley. Again, thank you, NetGalley, but I want a copy, desperately. Anyway, so this is an enemies to lovers book. Literally enemies to lovers. If someone has managed to write enemies to lovers properly, it's this author. And I am biased. Fair warning, I am absolutely biased, and I know I am. The reason why I'm biased is because this is the author of Draco Malfoy and the Mortifying Ordeal of Being in Love.
Turn to page 394.
My most favorite Hermione fanfic. I think it's actually the fanfic that really got me into the fandom. It's the only fanfic that I have read twice. It might even... I don't even remember the last time I read a book twice. Yeah, okay, it was so good. Because the writing style of the author is just full of life. Yeah, does that make sense? The banter is on point and there are so many puns, okay? If you love puns, you will enjoy this. If you don't want to read something that's like really serious and with really deep and detailed world building and plot that has depth, this is for you, okay? Because this book is pure fun. A fair warning though, if you have a problem with puns that deal with the human anatomy, then probably skip this book, okay? Because so many of the puns have to do with the human anatomy and bodily fluids that it might take you out of the story if you don't like that thing. I just had a good laugh, okay? I was laughing. I should tell you what it's about besides it being enemies to lovers. So our two main characters are from two orders that are very much in conflict. Yeah, they're not warring, they're not fighting, but they're enemies, okay? Because our main girl, she is a healer and she follows the bright path. But our main dude is an assassin and he follows the, I think it was dusk path? Not dark, but dusk. Anyway, complete opposites. We have the good, we have the bad, we have the healer and we have the murderer, right? And what happens is that our murderer very desperately needs medical help. Like desperately. Our healer is the expert, like the top brain in that one specific area of medicine that our main character needs help with, yeah? So he has to get her to help him or he will die. And he does manage to get her to help him. She doesn't want to, so we keep having this banter, this constant rejection of emotions, of help. They bicker so much, but it's great bickering, okay? And the whole book, which is very short, it has to be longer. Why isn't it longer? I know there will be a second book. When will the second book come out? This is way too short. Get writing, please, okay? Okay, so for the whole book, we just follow these two characters and we get his POV and her POV. And it is a character-focused book. Right? You do have plot, you do have world building, but they're secondary, okay? First and foremost, you have the two main characters and their dynamic. And while we have this very fast-paced, fun dynamic with the puns and the hatred, we also get these sprinkles of very whimsical and sappy descriptions of places and emotions to just add a different type of life to the writing and the story itself, and it's just so charming. And I have to say that I am so pleased with myself because I managed to get my best friend in our book club to read it. She applied for the arc, she got it, and she read it, and she also absolutely loved it, which means that now I can finally get her to read Draco Malfoy in the Mortifying Ordeal of Being in Love, because I have been talking about it to her for the past like year and a half, maybe even 2 years, and she keeps saying she'll read it, but she's not reading it, but maybe now she will read it, okay, because it's so good. Anyway, did I love the book more than the fanfiction? No, but I still absolutely love the book and I want more. Thank you. But I do have like a tiny little nitpicking to do, and that's the glossary, because I really hate it when the glossary is at the beginning of the book and you just get all of this information at the beginning. Put it in the back. The glossary belongs in the back. Please, come on. Don't overcomplicate things, okay? Put it in the back. After all of this gushing about the book, I do have to point out a few things, okay? So, if you are expecting dark romance, this is not for you. If you are expecting deep story and plot and world building, this is not for you. If you have not read the fanfiction I mentioned, you might not connect to this story at the same emotional level that other people do, and you might not really get why people are so excited about this story and like it so much. Because you might expect it to have a fantasy world and plot that stands out, but it doesn't. And if you have read the fanfic and are either expecting a retelling of the story or a completely different story, you're probably not going to be satisfied because you're not going to get either. Okay? You can definitely see the similarities, but some things are also quite different. So when you're going into this book, kind of manage your expectations. I'd say the only thing that you could probably expect is to relax and laugh. And as a final thought, I would say that this book is a lot more rom-com than it is romantasy. Yeah, absolutely loved it. 5 out of 5. A very good job done. A very good job done. Brain! Anyway, my brain is now malfunctioning. This gets a 5 out of 5. Looking forward for the next one. And this is the end of the book review for the month. Once again, a huge thank you to NetGalley for all of the arcs. As a disclaimer, these are completely my own thoughts. I'm getting basically nothing for these reviews, except maybe possibly getting access to other books, because on NetGalley, the more you review the books that you have been approved for, the higher your rating goes, and the higher your rating is, the more likely you are to be approved for more books. That's how the website works. And you can be fully honest in your reviews, that's not going to affect your stats. So this has been a completely honest review of all of the arcs. Again, just a disclaimer. With all of that out of the way, if you watched until the end, thank you so much for watching. Any book recommendations are welcome. If you have read any of the books I have read, then please feel free to share your own thoughts and opinions about them. And again, a final request once more, if you know a book similar to The Secret History, please let me know. Okay, please, I'm begging. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye bye!